Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, on which both Esquimalt and the City of Victoria are located, and on which our police department does their work. This is our first time doing a fully digital meeting, so we hope everything goes smoothly, and we're glad that the public is able to join us. For the board members, the first thing I need is a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Sean. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Seconded by Michaela. Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda? Yeah, Barb, go ahead.
This is our first time. Yeah, I'm wondering where the two report outs, myself and Sean Dillon, who attended an ICD course.
Under new business, item E, ICD course review.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, Chief, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, while you were gone, there's one item for Horizon report. It's a 2020 VicPD annual report. Just a Horizon report in the public session.
Okay, so why don't we put that as item F of new business? So Horizon report on the annual report. And then for members of the public who are interested, Colette, is it possible to update this agenda after the meeting to make sure the annual report is published there as part of item 3F new business?
Yes, it can be released tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. That's great. It's a really good report, and I think people will want to take the time to read it, and also that it sets out the priorities for 2021, but I'm getting ahead of ourselves. I'll wait till it's on the agenda later on. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay, Barb, I see your hand again. I'm not sure if it's up still or up again. Up still. Okay, thank you. All those in favor of the agenda? Any opposed? Okay, and just a reminder to board members, I can only see at this point 3 of you and the chief. So, sorry, 6 of you and the chief. So that means I can't see everyone. So just do use the hand up function. And I'm battling with various shades of sunlight in my face here, so I'm trying to accommodate as we go. Okay, so the agenda has been approved. There are a number of standing items on the agenda tonight, and the first is adoption of the minutes of the public meeting of March the 16th. So I need a motion to adopt those minutes. Thank you, Sean. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Paul. Any corrections to the minutes? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Sean, sorry, did you have a question? Or you're just voting? Okay, yeah, don't raise your little orange hands to vote. That'll just get really confusing really quickly. So just hands up or voice your opposition if you're opposed to something, and let's save the hand up function for actual questions. Although I appreciate the enthusiasm. Okay, so the minutes are adopted, and Chief, I'm going to turn it over to you right now. And for those following along, this is page 3 of the agenda, and this is the Chief's monthly activity report. Chief, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair. So just a couple of highlights that I wanted to point out to the board. I'll start off on March 23rd. I was a panelist on the virtual law enforcement and public health conference that was held in the United States, and I was asked to do so by the Canadian Police Knowledge Network, which is online training, and I'm actually a board member for there, and it went really well, and our topic was the power of technology, standards, and collaboration. I also participated with the Dunahee family in the Michael Dunahee Keep the Hope Alive run that was done. It was the 30th anniversary of Michael Dunahee's disappearance. There was a reserve constable graduation that I attended to on April the 6th. The class, so this was our second class that was done during COVID, smaller class size, making sure that they were kept separated as a result of COVID and the public health orders. But it's always good to get more reserve constables out on our streets and engaged in crime prevention programs. I also presented with Chief Jones from the Transit Police on behalf of the BC Municipal Chiefs of Police to the Special Committee on Reforming the Police Act. On the equity, can I move forward to the next agenda item, the equity, diversity, inclusion engagement, Chair?
Before you do that, maybe can you just give us a bit more color in terms of the Police Act submission?
Yes, sure. Yeah, so I mean, our Police Act submission was there's lots of things that we're doing well, and there's areas that we need to improve on. And as police leaders, we are engaged and willing and at the table to listen to our communities and making sure that we make meaningful change. We talked about revisions and changes to oversight and the Office of the Police Complaint Commissioner and how some improvements could be made to enhance the process to give greater public confidence and to have that transparency with police. We talked about police engagement with our communities of color and our Indigenous communities, our Black communities, and how work is being done, but more work needs to be done in those areas to make sure that we maintain levels of trust and confidence in those areas. And so, and then finally, we talked about the role of police in responding to calls where there's people with mental illness. What does that look like? Where civilian-led teams can really enhance service, where police can work together in a co-response model, in a partnership model, so we have mental health experts who can step in the very first instance if the police are required, where there's violence, where there's weapons, where there's criminality, and there's de-escalation that occurs. And now a meaningful discussion can occur, or an assessment can occur as to what is going on with the individual. What's the earliest opportunity where the police officer can disengage and a mental health professional can engage? So those are some really, really meaty topics, important topics to community in what the role of police is and how we can improve that and how the Police Act can be amended. I'll leave my comments at that.
Okay, thank you. Before you move on to the equity, diversity, and inclusion update, excuse me, are there any other comments or questions on the chief or for the chief on his report, his activities report? Okay, Chief, go ahead on to equity, diversity, and inclusion update.
Okay, perfect. So I'll look at, again, on page 3, just to follow along. We've had a couple meetings. Mayor, as you're well aware of, the City of Victoria's Welcoming City Task Force. So there's been a bunch of homework given to us during that process. So I'm happy to be on that committee and on that task force representing Vic PD. We're actually making some really good headway and some good momentum, and it's a good group to work with. The Victoria Multi-Faith Society held a virtual workshop that I participated in, and it was discussing racism, leading change for multi-faith spaces, and it's an anti-racism project that I've been asked to sit on. And this was kind of meeting 2 or 3 of something that's kind of a long-term 6-month project. I attended the Employment Equity Partnership Roundtable. This was part of the inclusion project that many community leaders and community members were a part of. It was a virtual session, and the session that I attended, it was kind of a 3-day webinar. I attended day 1, and I wanted to specifically focus on the session that was on policy and public leadership, dismantling systems of racism, which I thought was important. And I just wanted to give you a couple updates on our staff survey. So the board is aware that we conducted a staff survey, and in part, we were collecting demographic data on our organization. What's the background of our individuals? What languages do they speak? What's their ethnicity? What's their background? It was done on a completely voluntary basis, and people were allowed to stay anonymous if they wanted to. And so the results of that report are actually being compiled. We're about 50% through it. So I'll be reporting through the HR committee on next steps and where we see some areas for improvement within our own organization. The JIBC, so the Police Academy, did do a curriculum review. I know the board is aware of this. Working with the Police Academy, the Victoria Police Department was a part of it. We did connect the Justice Institute group to the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Advisory Committee, who are experts in this field, who have community leaders from all our different communities who could add value to that curriculum review. And I'm pleased to let the board know that there's 2 new competencies that have now been added, and these will be a part of the curriculum for all new police officers, municipal police officers in the province of British Columbia. And those are diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the second one is conflict management. So those are 2 new competencies that will be added, and every police recruit that's trained at the Police Academy for municipal policing will be a part of that. And that is just adding to the list of competencies that have been there before. And the last thing I'll just leave you with is, through our marketing partner, and through our leadership from our Human Resources Division, we did create a new recruiting website. Recruiting is top of mind. We want to make sure that we're attracting the right people. We're attracting people from all our diverse communities. And so we're making enhancements to how we can build our brand and how we can outreach into many communities where traditionally maybe policing is not a career option or a first or second choice. And so we're doing the best job that we can. But right now, the pandemic's not helping out. Obviously, we can't do any personal outreach, but we're really using social media platforms to try to leverage as much as we can. And it's going to be an investment that's going to take time. This will not be done overnight, but we can lay the groundwork and we can put systems in place, connections in place, and build those relationships from now where people are teenagers and they will even consider policing as an option as they grow into and become young adults. And so I'll leave my update at that. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, just use the little hand up function if you have any questions for the chief. Chief, in terms of the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Advisory Committee is excellent and has been around for a long time. What kind of work is happening inside the department in terms of, is there an equity, diversity, and inclusion committee or a task force, or just, you know, internally, what's happening?
We have a committee called Diversity, Inclusion, and Respectful Workplace. The chair on that committee is Deputy Chief Colin Watson, and I'll get him to just kind of update you a little bit about some of the work they're doing. In fact, the survey that I mentioned, the internal survey, to just learn a little bit more about our people and what their makeup is, was actually spearheaded by the Diversity, Inclusion, and Respectful Workplace Committee. Deputy, can you just provide a brief update?
Sure, thanks, Chief. And the Chief's absolutely right. So the work of that committee is to try to sort of coordinate the best as we can on some of these initiatives throughout the department. Some of these things, like the work with the curriculum review at the JI, is just involves one or two people. In this case, it was me that was a representative for the department on that. In other cases, like the staff survey that we recently conducted, that was an initiative on behalf of the committee to both examine how best to approach that work, and then ultimately what the survey instrument itself looked like. So we coordinate our work through that, and you know, of course, we try to look to see which things that we can have positive impact on a short-term, medium-term, long-term basis, and a number of things underway, and the work continues. The survey itself actually took quite a bit of time in the latter part of last year, so we're really looking forward to being able to conclude that project and look forward to next steps. Yeah, so that gives you a bit of a brief update.
Thank you. Any other questions? Paul, go ahead.
Thanks. I don't apparently have control of my camera, so you'll just get my voice. Back probably about a year ago, a little more, we issued a statement on work to address racism and discrimination, and one part of that was a demographic survey of the police department. And could you tell me what the status of that is?
I think, Paul, that was the survey that the chief and Deputy Watson were just referring to.
Okay,
but...
I'm sorry.
No, okay.
So, okay, I would thank you very much. I was confused about the nature of that, and thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay, no problem. Yeah, it's very difficult being online and not being able to see each other and act. And anyways, yeah. So, and it might have not been entirely clear, but yeah, that's exactly the survey that the board asked for the department to undertake, and it's being undertaken. We'll get to see the results quite soon. Okay, thank you. So now we move on to committee reports. And I believe we are starting, sorry, I'm just flipping to the page, with the HR committee. Charlotte, why don't I turn it over to you to just highlight what's in the written report here for the public in terms of items discussed at HR. Oh, and Charlotte, sorry, you're muted.
Hi, thanks everyone. For our Human Resources Committee report today, we don't have any motions. The union has entered an agreement for a survey, for a cultural workplace survey, and they've reached out to senior management and the board for some thoughts, so that's really exciting. So we're happy to hear that the results are expected early summer. We have police services recruit and advanced training that has been approved, but it has no impact on our department. And as anyone has probably noticed, we are all doing our meetings virtually based on the provincial health orders at the moment.
Thank you, Charlotte. Does anyone have any questions? Paul, go ahead. Okay, hand was still up. Okay, no problem. Any other questions or any questions? Okay, we'll move on to governance. Sean, I'm going to turn it over to you again. A bit of information about what was discussed at the governance committee.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so governance just has a few items that we discussed. One of them was the strat planning update, which was the 2020-2024 strat plan, and basically a progress of the VicPD, Open VicPD website, some new business tools and processes that managers will use to contribute to their goals. So we're looking forward to the reports, and of course the reports will be now coming to the board quarterly. So that was a bit of an update. Exciting piece is that the VicPD service charter, this is a draft that we looked at for input. It's going to come, I believe, soon when it's ready, and then it's a really neat charter. It's going to really set a high level expectation and shows that the department, of course, overall has a high level or high degree of service to its community. So it's going to be really exciting to see when that comes forward. And the other two items were the Provincial Policing Priority Survey, and of course the CAPG, which is the Canadian Association of Police Governance Boards, annual general meeting call for resolutions. This is basically an annual meeting, but all the sort of police governance folks sort of get together. Now, obviously, with COVID, it's going to be virtual, and basically some resolutions are put forward. So we are going to be putting some forward, and let the public know some of these resolutions will be considered by the EGM or folks that are in charge of that. And if our resolutions are picked up, then they'll be, of course, broadcasted. But of course, this is everybody all across Canada. So there'll be a number of resolutions coming forward, but chances are always the themes are always the same. So, and that's the update. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Sean. Any questions for Sean? Okay, Doug, why don't we go over to you for finance, and then there's some decisions that have been made, I believe, since finance that at Victoria Council that relate to number A, so I can give an update on that if it's useful, or you may have it already, but why don't I turn it over to you to walk through your report first.
Thank you, Chair. I'll present my report here, and then if you can update or correct me as required, I'd appreciate it. But the first item that the committee discussed and resolved, we believe, is the new budget allocation formula under the framework agreement. It was a question of whether it was to be implemented over a 2-year period or a 3-year period, and the province, or Doug Lepard through the province, came back and clarified that the increased budget allocation for the city of Victoria will be phased in with 1/2 this fiscal year 2021 and fully implemented by 2022, and of course the offsetting decreases for Esquimalt. Second item was the city asked, and we agreed, that the ECOM's request for additional funding was approved, and the city did also ask if the half of that funding could be funded through the Financial Stability Reserve Fund, and the board approved that, and it was so, and it was agreed to, with the added stipulation that we clarified for future what the reserve fund is to be used for, and basically cautioned all partners that if the reserve fund gets depleted, then the municipalities must fund any additional extraordinary costs. This is all covered in the letter on page 6 and 7, I think, of the agenda report. And lastly, my report is the approximately 3-month year-to-date monthly financial report, and would entertain any questions on that or any of the other items. Thank you.
Okay, and just for, with respect to item A, at a council meeting a couple of weeks ago, that budget allocation formula transfer from Esquimalt to Victoria was approved by Victoria Council and added to our 2021 budget. Again, just for ultimate transparency, if Mr. Hercombe, who's the controller, can you just walk us through the some of the highlights of the end of quarter report, the end of quarter financial report? And Colette, is it possible, while Mr. Hercombe is talking, to have that displayed on the screen for the public to see, to scroll through as he's speaking?
I'll let Steve start talking first and then
Okay. Sure, I'll start talking. Every month we bring a financial report through the Finance Committee to the board. This brings us up to March 22nd, which represents approximately 18.5% of the payroll year. Actuals to date were 19.1%, so slightly over budget, but that was due to retirement payouts. We have a significant amount of retirements at the beginning of the year. And also for 2021, there is no operating budget for this. The intent of the board was to draw down from the Employee Benefit Obligation Reserve. So if we adjust for those retirement payouts, we're actually slightly below budget at about 18%. There are a couple of items that are causing that below budget right now. Part of that is the wages and benefits are below budget. That is due partly to staffing shortages. We are below strength right now. And also timing of available seats at the Justice Institute versus the retirements. Retirements tend to come at the beginning of the year, the bulk of them, but we only have 3 intakes into the Justice Institute. Overtime is also slightly below budget at this time. However, I do expect that to increase. We'll see more protests through the year, and that does tend to drive up our overtime costs. And also, as we get into the summer, more people take annual leave. So we'll see more backfill for patrol shortages there. Capital expenditures are at 33.5%. That is mostly due to timing of vehicle orders that happen at the beginning of the year. We expect to be within budget on capital expenses. There are a couple of extraordinary items. One is we do have more janitorial expenses due to dealing with COVID safety measures. We added on a janitorial shift for an extra $13,000 a month. We also received $187,000, just slightly under that, from the Legislative Assembly that was in relation to protests that occurred in 2020. We couldn't recognize that revenue in 2020 due to the uncertainty over how much we would receive back from them for reimbursement of costs. So that revenue has been recorded in 2021, and that will help to offset some of our 2021 expenses. So I'll just leave it at that, and if anybody has any questions.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Colette, for sharing the screen. You can unshare now. I just think it's a good practice when we're online. If we can share what we're looking at, that's great. Any questions from the board or comments for Steve or Doug on the Q1 financials? Okay, thank you very much. And we move on to the board chair's update. And I don't believe there's anything that we have. Barb, anything from you? No. Okay, next is over to Charla, who is the BC Association of Police Board representative from our board to the BC APB and also the president of that organization. So Charla, if you would like to update the board and the public on BC APB's work since the last board meeting.
Sure, thank you. So we've been quite busy at BCAPB, which is made up of board members from municipal police boards across the province. We made our submission to the special committee on reforming the Police Act. So there was a committee formed and got together, and we put our submission forward. We're preparing for our next board meeting coming up fairly quickly. And I met yesterday with David Pilling, who's Director of Police Governance for Province of BC, to look for ways that BCAPB and the province can work towards in partnership for police governance in some areas. And there are a few of us that are meeting with Minister Farnsworth on Monday as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Charla. Any questions for Charla? Okay, and for the public who's watching, the Police Act review is being undertaken by the province to, well, review and modernize the Police Act. The report from the province was originally supposed to come out this October, which I know we were all looking forward to, but I understand that it's been delayed until the spring. I'm not sure if that's, Chief, can you confirm that, or Charla, that the committee, oh, sorry, Chief, you're on mute.
I'm gonna actually ask Deputy Watson, who's president of the BC Municipal Chiefs, if he's heard an update on the special committee's work.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer to that. I mean, it seems that from the conversations that I've had of late, that delaying past October is certainly, you know, a possibility, but I think that decision is still in the hands of the special committee and the legislature.
Okay, so no firm decision's been made. It's just, it was supposed to be June and now it's October, and who knows when it will be, but hopefully soon, because there's a lot of important things in there. Okay, Charlotte, thanks for your update, and apologies all for my lighting. I'm in my office and I haven't had a meeting with this setup, so I know it looks like I'm in the dark, but I'm really here with you. Okay, the next item is board member engagement, and this is an opportunity, again, challenging during COVID, but still possible nonetheless, for board members to just share what they've been up to in the community, what they're hearing, what they're working on as board members, any events they've attended. Again, difficult with COVID, but the board is still quite engaged. So I just wonder if anyone has any updates at this point. Yeah, Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, you're right. With COVID, it's been very difficult to get out in the community, but through social media online, I was able last week to sort of promote and help assist with a fundraiser, which was for HeroWorks. They are currently involved. They're a nonprofit that does basically radical renovations for other nonprofits, and
Sean just got disconnected somehow. Okay, well, we'll give him the floor when he comes back. Colette, I don't know if you can, oh, there he is. Sean, we lost you for a minute. You were just talking about HeroWorks.
Yes, can you hear me now? Sorry.
And yeah, you just got sent out of the meeting for some reason.
Okay, I'm not sure. I didn't hear. Okay, so I'll make it really quick. Yeah, there was a HeroWorks fundraiser. I think it was a $36,000 goal, and they smashed it. We got $43,000, which is fantastic. And so I basically showed my support online, and also sort of donating as well. And I sort of made a donation on behalf of our board and organization to support them. And so yeah, I just wanted to give them a shout out for what they're doing. I believe their current project is currently renovating the Salvation Army property just on Johnson Wharf there. So it's going to be a cool project when it's finished. So that's my update. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Any other board member engagement? Anything that people want to share about the work they've been doing?
Doug speaking. I can brief update if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just announced that I've been very recently, as of today, actually appointed as a volunteer. This is not directly related to the policing, of course, but as a volunteer director and treasurer of the Esquimalt Farmers Market. So my inaugural board meeting is actually in about an hour and a half. So looking forward to that. This is in addition to the other boards that I serve on right now, all on basically a volunteer basis. I'm enjoying that as part of my retirement gig, of course. So thank you. This is not directly related to the policing, of course, but as a volunteer director and treasurer of the Esquimalt Farmers.
Sorry, I was muted and no one told me. My computer just told me I was muted. Any other board member report outs?
Looking forward to that. This is in addition to the other boards.
Okay, seeing none, we move on to something that I know we're all very excited about, which is the board's 2021 to 2022 strategic priorities. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background on this, and then our work today is to accept or debate and accept the strategic priorities. And then at our next committee meetings, we'll fill out the actions a little bit, and then we'll bring those back to the public for ratification at our next board meeting. So every year, the department has its own strategic plan, which is a 5-year strategic plan, and the board oversees the creation of that, and it's excellent, and we heard a little bit about it earlier in the meeting. But the board also, in and of itself, has taken upon itself to set strategic priorities each year. This year, at the beginning of the year, or in December rather, we usually have an annual board session to determine our strategic priorities. This year we were short 2 board members. So we wanted to wait until we had our new board members appointed to do that. We now have them here, and you've met them before, Michaela and Paul. And so with our 2 board members, the board sat down together for an afternoon, and because we're already 4 months into this year, and because a lot of the priorities that you see here, and they're listed on page 20, are really big, meaty items that are going to take a couple of years for us to get through. We've decided this year to make these the priorities until the end of this term of councils and into the end of 2022. So they're there, as I said, on page 20, and I'm just going to read them out. And this was the board rolling up our sleeves together, getting intelligence from our community, getting intelligence from our departments, kind of reading the wind and figuring out what is it that we need to do as a board. So the first one, and again, the actions under these are to be determined, is tend to the mental health and wellness of members and staff. So we know that as a board, our staff are the most important asset that we have, and that they are struggling right now, as are police departments across the country and around the world, particularly with COVID and other challenges. And so that's number 1 priority. Number 2 is to increase our financial stability and sustainability. Number 3, and this is really important to the board, as you can see, we spent a lot of the retreat talking about this, and we've got some actions fleshed out already, is to strengthen the relationship with the community. So we know that there are many people in the community who don't even really know what a police board is or what it does, and we want to change that. And we've got some new board members with some really good ideas about how. Some of those are laid out in the actions, and some of them will be determined. The 4th one is to strengthen our relationship with the provincial government. We've got a very good working relationship with the government, and we want to maintain that. We know that with the Police Act review that's underway, there will be a lot of changes coming, and we want to be on top of those, proactive about those, and really in tune and in the loop with the province. The 5th one is to educate ourselves and advocate for better health supports for people with mental health and substance use. We had quite a bit of a discussion about this at the board retreat, and originally it just said advocate for better health supports for people with mental health and substance use issues, but then one board member made the poignant point that we better educate ourselves and learn more about this issue ourselves as a board, so that we would be better advocates. And again, I've seen some of the draft actions that have been fleshed out in this area, and I think it's going to be really good work for the board to do, and we'll be good advocates on behalf of the community. Number 6, increase awareness and efforts to combat racism and focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Obviously, this is something the board set as a commitment last June in response to the George Floyd death and the Black Lives Matter and many of the things that were happening in our community. Now we've taken those priorities from last June and set them as a concrete strategic priority for the board itself for the next couple of years. And then this last one, it might be a little bit cheeky, but we've called it Succession Proof, the Framework Agreement. The Framework Agreement for members of the public is the governing document that determines how policing is delivered with a joint board and a police department for Victoria and Esquimalt. I am not running again, and we're not quite sure about Mayor Desjardins yet, but she'll make that determination when she does. But we know that one of the reasons that things have worked so well in the last 8 years is because we've worked together well as co-chairs. We don't know what a new situation electorally could produce, so we want to make sure that regardless of who's in these seats, the framework agreement is in a good place to make sure that success is guaranteed. And this is really important to the board because they're hardworking volunteers, and we don't want to have any political turmoil that's unnecessary. So that is a priority for the next 2 years. So board members, hopefully I've done some justice in outlining those priorities. I guess I'll ask the board if anyone wants to say anything to complement what I've said. And then for the public, we're going to roll up our sleeves, flesh out some of these actions, and we'll be back to all of you in May to share these with you and make sure that we're on the right track. So Barb, is there anything you wanted to add, or any other board members on the board's strategic priorities?
No, thank you, Lisa. It was a good session, and I think we've got a lot of work, but we've got a year and a half to move it forward more than a year and a half. The only correction I would make is we're still down one board member. So if there's anyone out there in the public, please look to apply.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually going to mention that at the board engagement update. Colette, I don't know if there's a way for, I know that the public isn't in the Teams chat with us, but if someone's tweeting, or I know we're on YouTube Live, if someone could put the link to apply to be a board member, that would be great, because yes, we do need one more person. As you can see, it's a great group. There's lots of exciting work going on. So for anyone who's interested, or anyone who's watching and knows somebody who's interested, we'll try and find a way to get the link into one of our online platforms that we're using right now. Any other board members want to share anything on the board's strategic priorities? Okay, great. And then the last item here under standing items is framework agreement, and we just put this here as a standing item in case there's ever anything that arises. Does anyone have anything to say or add or ask on the framework agreement? Yeah, Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to update the board that the meeting for the administrative committee that was going to be coming together to discuss some of the recommendations from Mr. Lepard's report, phase 2 of his report, that meeting has now been changed to May the 4th at 1 o'clock. So our administrative committee will be getting together, and Sean Dillon is the board rep, and I'll be there, and the CEO and the city manager will be there as well. Thank you.
Chief, can you just remind the public and the board what that meeting is for specifically?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Lepard completed 2 reports, phase 1 and phase 2, and there was a number of recommendations coming specifically out of phase 2 of his report. And some of those recommendations was just on increasing communication, just making sure that both the township, the city, and the board were working well together, that there was pre-identified performance metrics that the department had established with consultation with both of the communities, and that they were reporting out on a regular basis. So there's a few other smaller areas. One of the things was a orientation package for new officers that are assigned to the township. Could officers be given some sort of an orientation so that they would know what the township residents and business owners expected from their police officers? And so those are some of the things that we'll be discussing. And I know that some are easy items and some will take a bit more time to kind of flush out, but those are kind of off the top of my head, some of the topics that I can think of.
Yeah, okay, and the other one is the 5 officers. Lepard recommended 5.1 officers being redeployed from Esquimalt to Victoria. There's differences of opinion, 3 different ways about that, so hopefully we'll be able to begin to sort that out as well. Okay, thank you. So we'll leave that and we move on to new business. There's a number of items here. The first, really, sorry to the public, this isn't in camera, but it's kind of boring, the timing of the beginning of our board meetings. We have been feeling a bit rushed in camera, and you saw us be 6 minutes late today, so I just wanted to get consent from the board that we would start kind of our board only from 3:15 till 3:30, and then begin the in camera at 3:30. So I guess Colette wanted me to bring it to the board just to make sure that that works okay with everybody. Does anyone have any problems with that? Just so we're not rushing. Colette, is there anything that I need to do? Do we need a motion to that effect?
We can make a motion, but I was just going to also suggest that perhaps the meetings start at 3:45 to allow some time with the closed in camera for the chief if necessary, and if that's not required, then the in camera could start at 3:30, just to have that option available.
Sure, yep. But I guess basically in terms of board members' calendars, we're asking for 15 more minutes of your time, starting at 3:15 every 4th Tuesday or 3rd Tuesday rather than 3:30. Just wanted to confirm that that's okay. Okay, thank you. Next, ACT officers. We wanted the chief to give a public update on this. It's been of high public interest, and chief, I'd walk us back through as much detail as you wish, but I think giving the public kind of a comprehensive update on this situation, how it evolved, where it's at, and what's next. Oh, and just remember to unmute yourself. It happens.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. So thank you, Chair. So I'll start off just from the beginning so that everyone's kind of up to speed on this. So this was a request from the police board in 2019. So during the 2019 budget, the police department completed our budget request, and the police board submitted the budget, which included the continuation of 2 officers that were attached to the assertive community treatment team. Now, we already had 1 officer attached, so this was in addition to the 1 officer. In 2019, Esquimalt Council supported the positions, the 2 positions, and Victoria Council did not. The board was left with a decision of what to do with that. And the police board at that time in 2019 felt that these 2 officers were required to maintain adequate and effective policing both within the city and the township. So they wrote to government, which is the dispute resolution process in place under provincial legislation, to review council's decision and to ask and to determine whether these positions were required. This was done by the police board, if you recall, back in September of 2019. What I did in the interim, knowing that City Council had not funded these 2 ACT positions, is I did the right thing, where I kept the positions in place, interim. I didn't know that it was going to take 1 year and 4 months for government to respond to the board's request. But the right thing to do was not to disrupt the ACT program, keep the officers in place, because we were all optimistic that government would more than likely allow these positions and fund these positions through their direction. Come fast forward to January of 2021, we received word from the Assistant Deputy Minister that they would not fund the 4 positions that the board had asked for, 2 of those of which are the ACT positions. So as a result of that, we had a discussion with the police board. The board supported me reaching into different levels of government or different layers of leadership within the provincial government to see if they would be willing to review their decision based on what was happening currently with COVID, with more and more individuals with severe and persistent mental illness who were not getting the supports and the outreach that they required. And so I did that. Government was open to reviewing the decision that they had made. And at the end of March, March 31st, I received a call from the new Assistant Deputy Minister for Police Services, who indicated that the government was not willing to was not willing to change their decision, and the original decision from January was going to stand. So that put me in a very difficult position. Knowing that this was a possibility, when we received the original decision, Chair, I reached out to the President CEO of Island Health, Kathy McNeil, let her know that we had received a decision that was not favorable to maintaining the 2 officers on the assertive community treatment teams. So she was going to bring this up, in fact did bring it up because we had subsequent conversations with her partners and her leaders within the Ministry of Health. And she knew that these positions were vital and critical to maintaining safety for her staff so that the team could assist individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. All of it was not to be. I wish I was in a better position to keep these positions funded. These are now unfunded positions. I do not have the luxury and the staffing to be able to allocate positions that are unfunded, although I know that the importance of this is critical. So what I've done is we've served notice to Island Health for 1 month that on May the 1st, that we will be pulling the 2 positions. We will be keeping one, the officers that was already there originally. I am reaching in to Chief Green from the Saanich Police Department. During our analysis, we determined that 30% of the workload of ACT falls to the Saanich Police Department or was happening in Saanich Police's jurisdiction. That is a substantial amount of work. I can't speak for what Chief Green's response will be or whether they're willing to add some supports in place to the 1 big PD officer that's left. I know that our management team and our leadership team is considering requesting 1 ACT position for the 2022 budget. That is a possibility because we know the importance of maintaining police officers on the ACT teams. I'll leave it at that. I'm sure the board probably has some questions that or they would like me to clarify, and I'm happy to take those. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Are there questions from the board? Sean, go ahead, and then Barb.
Yes, so very quickly, to the Chief, how have membership sort of, what's the question looking for is, what is their response been in terms of knowing that the ACT team is, going to be obviously changed to more patrol, sort of what kind of feedback have you received from membership in terms of this decision? what's their health like, their mood like, etc. If you don't mind touching upon that. When news came about.
Sure. I think generally speaking, there's a bit of shock that government wouldn't support having 2 police officers that continue to be attached to the ACT teams. This is playing out every single day, including the 107 calls that B-Watch Patrol attended today. They had 17 calls holding in the queue and 107 calls that they attended today in a 12-hour period. Many of those involved a mental health component. There was individuals that were contemplating suicide and whatnot, and you would think that what we're seeing today, that would have been a priority to maintain that level of support, because the police aren't involved and engaged, as you know, Sean, in every case. It's a case-by-case basis, and only when the police are required, and it's an advantage to have them there to maintain safety for the staff so that they can engage with clients who have complex needs. That's when the police officers engage. So there's a bit of surprise and shock. I will be honest, there's mixed feelings, whether some officers feel that we need to continue to invest upstream, although they know we don't have the resources to invest. But a lot of the officers understand that if the positions are unfunded and our cupboards are bare, that we also have struggling to answer 911 calls, that has to take priority, because otherwise it's putting too much burden on the remaining officers, of which we have too few. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, anything further from you?
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, Barb, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Chief, what supports are available and in place for now what is only one officer doing this job? I know that we have one officer doing MIST, and it's the same sort of situation. It's way beyond the capacity of one person. So what extra supports are in place for this person?
Sure, that's a great question. So we do everything that we can. Our Human Resources Division is always looking at new programs that we can to offer our staff. The first thing that we talk to our staff about is just being self-aware, being self-conscious of how they're feeling, how they're acting, how might be a difference in some of the stress levels that they are. We talk to our officers to look out for each other. So self-assessment, self-care is critical. It's important that the employer have programs in place that are meaningful, that can be accessed. This is a work in progress. I will tell you, as the board is well aware, that WorkSafe have multiple programs that support the mental care and mental wellness of employees. A lot of those programs are not relevant and applicable to police officers in the line of work and the field of work that we're in. So that's always a bit of a challenge and a struggle. But at the end of the day, the whole ACT program is being reviewed, from my understanding, from Island Health leadership teams. They're going to review because they will not be able to serve the same population that they did when they had the luxury of having 3 police officers. That's just not going to happen. And that means that there are going to be gaps. We will do everything we can to support the program and to support our lone officer to make sure that they aren't left feeling a high level of anxiety, but that'll be something that'll happen with conversations on a regular basis. And again, there's some uncharted territory, because we've always had 3 officers for a number of years, and it's only now that we're going to go back to 1 at a time where I know that the board feels this, and certainly I do as a chief. It's a need for more resources, not less, in this area.
Yes, and given the provincial budget and the increased funding for ACT teams, I'm hopeful that we can channel some of that back toward the support that police give. Thank you.
Thanks, Barb. Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the update, Chief. I guess I have one question based on an assumption, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ACT team under the Island Health Authority crosses all municipal boundaries, within the CRD at least, and yet the police department, our boundaries are basically Victoria and Esquimalt. So how do you handle any ACT team calls outside of our jurisdictions?
Sure. So that's correct. The Assertive Community Treatment Team program is a regional program, and clients live, although I would say that primarily they live in Victoria and Esquimalt jurisdiction, and a number of them live in Saanich, which attributes to that 30% mark that I mentioned, where the workload is. What we have is there are police officers that we would contact from individual, could be RCMP detachments or other police agencies, Oak Bay, Central Saanich, if there's a need for them to intervene to assist with an ACT client. The beauty and benefit, and this was proven by Dr. Wooden and Dr. Costigan in their independent research on the Assertive Community Treatment Program, is that the police officers attached to the team develop personal connections and relationships. And they develop those relationships not only with the staff that they're working with daily, but also with the clients. And those relationships really, really are beneficial, especially when somebody is in crisis, to build that trust and to make sure that individuals are stabilized in community. So these are some of the challenges moving forward. But again, I know that the health authority is committed to working with the Vic PD, and I know that they still are exploring all options right up till May 1st till those officers are removed, to see if they can kind of pull a rabbit out of the hat here and see what they can do, because I know that they recognize the importance of our officers.
Thanks, Chief. Barb, I see your hand.
Doug's question was thought-provoking, and it seems to me that if this is a regional service, albeit that there's a significant amount of work coming out of Saanich, Victoria, and I know that Esquimalt is supportive. Is this an opportunity for discussions around an integrated unit?
It's a great idea. Chief, how do we get that into the conversation? Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry. I think that I just don't see the number of calls and workload to a point where other police agencies would want to commit and dedicate resources and prioritize this. I can't speak for the Saanich Police Department because their numbers are a bit higher than some of the other police organizations. The bulk of the work is within Vic PD's jurisdiction, where people are residing and where they're accessing services. It just makes sense for us to be engaged in this work. I know that one officer is not enough, and that'll be a stretch to your previous question about workload and capacity and mental wellness. I just don't see this being an integrated unit with all partners at the table for reasons of just workload. But I do see perhaps a discussion with the Saanich Police Department, similar to what we did with K9, that this could be a Victoria-Saanich partnership. Although I am getting ahead of myself because I do want to speak to Chief Green before I make any commitments, and certainly I can't make any on his part.
Thank you. I mean, one thing that you can commit to Chief Green is that you're not going to use Victoria officers to help Saanich ACT clients out, which is that goes against everything I feel about regionality. But if we only have one officer, you've got to just tell them that those 30% of people are going to be on their own now because you're going to dedicate your resources to Victoria. Is that the plan?
Yeah, I just want to be careful that I'm not talking about kind of confidential discussions and strategies and stuff in the public session. I think I'll just leave it that I'm going to have a conversation with Chief Green. Chief Green is receptive to this conversation. It's a conversation I've had with his predecessor, Chief Downey, on a number of occasions. In fact, the Saanich Police Department, I recall, did actually ask for an ACT officer. It just didn't make the cut in their budget in a previous year. So I'll just keep the board informed. We'll have these discussions, but I do agree, Chair, with your concept that each one of us is responsible for our own policing needs, and we just don't have the luxury to do any heavy lifting for other organizations when we have the work that we have before us within our own organization.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate that. Anything else on this topic from anyone? Okay, let's move down then to approval of attendees at the virtual KCOL conference. So Colette, can I turn this over to you?
Sure. We just need the board to determine who wants to attend this webinar. There is a fee, so it does need to be approved by the board.
Paul, go ahead.
This is a webinar I'd very much like to attend.
Okay, and Michaela is volunteering as well. Okay, excellent. Anyone else? Okay, great. So with our two new board members attending, I will make a motion in the second to authorize the expenditures, but generally, what we love is if you go to these things and then bring back the wisdom and information to the public session, or, you know, or in camera if it's necessary, but it would just be, these are important topics, and it would be great to get a formal report back to the board from both of you once you've attended. Great. Okay, so can we have a motion to authorize the expenditure for Michaela and Paul to attend the session?
Also.
Sean, seconded by Charla. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, that carries. Yeah, it looks really, really important, and thanks to both of you for attending. Next, approval of attendees for the virtual Vancouver Police Board Fair and Impartial Policing training. Again, volunteers. Colette, what day is June 3rd? I had flagged this for myself, but I haven't looked at my calendar yet.
It's a Thursday.
Yeah, okay, that counts me out because we've got council meetings on Thursdays, but I think this is one that at least a couple of us should attend because it's the training our officers are getting. So are there any volunteers? Okay, oh, Michaela and Paul again. Michaela, I don't know if your hand is not. Okay, Paul put his hand up. All right, Paul, and anyone else? Sean. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, and I would if it wasn't on a Thursday because I think it's important. Okay, again, a motion authorizing the attendance of the two, Paul and Sean, moved by Doug, seconded by Charla. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, and again, speaking of reporting back, we did have a couple of directors attend the Institute of Corporate Directors courses. Sean has provided a written report. Barb is going to provide a verbal report. So Sean, why don't I turn it over to you to walk the board and the public through, you've presented it in written form, so maybe just the highlights. And thanks for attending.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to refresh the public, so ICD stands for the Institute of Corporate Directors, which is a high-level organization that has about 5,000 to 6,000 folks across Canada that basically undertake a number of courses. Some of these, like I've taken, or some of these folks take what's called designations, in which you might see the letters ICD after their name. And I believe Doug Crowder, one of our board members, is one of those folks that actually has taken what they call the corporate version of that. So folks who serve corporate boards typically will take this. Folks who are nonprofit boards sometimes will take a designation course a year long. And of course, in between, there's these courses that I've taken, which are basically you can take over a couple of 2-day period. Of course, now they're virtual. So as a member of the ICD, our board, I should say, or most police boards, we have an opportunity to take these classes for education and, of course, ongoing direction. So I have provided a written report, and basically it's called strategic oversight or strategic strategy. Basically, there's 4 components to a decision when a board wants to make a decision to sort of head in a new direction, if you will. There's a framework that you should follow, and this framework is actually built upon the folks who are the the Chartered Accountants Association of Canada. I forget the name exactly, but the fine folks that create all these high-level policies for other organizations, and it's basically built upon their framework. But essentially, what it is that I'll just outlay the 4 strategies. It's to be a brainstorming session. You come with different ideas of what strategies you might want to do. You don't decide where you want to go. Secondly, you evaluate strategies and you make a decision of the direction in which way you want to go. Third, you want to implement that strategy. Say, okay, so this is what we want to do. And the 4th thing is monitoring and checking on that strategy and making sure that the strategy is working as intended. So that's basically what the 2-day session was about. And some of the learning outcomes are in that report that I've outlined there. And we'll be bringing that course education to folks in our governance committee and our overall board, so that when the board comes across situations whereby we have a new strategy or we have a new policy or some kind of direction, then I will be looking to this education that I've learned and bringing that and helping use those tools to help push those things forward, and in a manner that is transparent and at the same time objective, meeting the overall board's needs. Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity for attending the course.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the report back. Yeah, that'll be really, really useful, particularly as we monitor the strategic plan going forward, the department strategic plan. Barb, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I attended board oversight of culture, and again, this was with the Institute of Corporate Directors. And I believe the board have received my written copy. I sent it late, or there was some reason it couldn't get on the agenda. But it was a course that was over a 2-day period for a total of 5 hours. Direct presentation and group breakout sessions, as well as about 3 hours of resource preparation reading that was absolutely fascinating. I guess the significant learnings is that we really learned a lot about what the definition of culture is. And there are 2 cultures we talked about. We talked about the culture of an organization, and we talked about the culture of a board. So culture is the personality of the organization, the behaviors of the organization, the norms that guide how things get done. And board and senior staff should provide input to define the culture of an organization. And you need to have a clear purpose and a good CAO chair leadership or chief chair leadership that helps define and then implement that culture of the organization. So often in the past, boards have really just used intuition as to what the culture is, but there's been a lot of work, and this is really rising to boards to really know that culture can be identified, it can be evaluated, and it can be monitored. And the reason you do that is because culture often only shows up when you're having significant problems, and then it becomes part of the discussion. But culture can be a real asset to an organization because it can help attract and retain talent, as well as foster innovation and agility in an organization. So some of the things that I came away with is there was a question, do you have culture on your agenda as an item so that there is a constant monitoring? And then the discussion was, well, what does that look like? What are the cultural metrics? And there are HR metrics, there are employee surveys, high performer attrition rates, employee turnover stats, and code of conduct training stats were some of the things that are used. A lot of boards are now using quick surveys of their employees where they throw out 3, 4, 5 questions that they can get a quick response back. That is only done after you've done sort of the deep dive to come up with those measurement standards that you may use in terms of measuring your culture. In terms of board culture, really the discussion was all around bias and being aware of the different kinds of bias, because all people will bring their own experiences to a board table. And so we talked about the 4 types of bias that may occur. Authority bias, where we have somebody on the board that might be an expert in an area, and the rest of the board will just turn around and often defer to that person on that area of expertise without really digging in and understanding that that they need to be part of the discussion as well. So one of the tips to minimize that bias is to get ideas from every member of the board, and where that expertise lies, have that person defer comment to the end of the discussion. Groupthink can happen where great minds think alike, and so yeah, it's a good idea, and the board just doesn't dig into the topic. Um, and one of the suggestions which I found would be very interesting tool to use is have somebody on the board be the devil's advocate position to really probe for and provide different perspectives on an issue. There's status quo bias, which is, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. You need to really, again, a lot of this is about the board not being afraid to ask questions of management, to really dig into issues, to really make sure that they feel that they've been provided sufficient information and that they have looked at they have ensured that they understand the pluses and minuses of a situation, and that they are assured that management has done that assessment of different options and presented to the board their reasoning for that. And then confirmation bias is the fourth one, which is sort of, overvaluing evidence that confirms our own belief. Yes, I thought this was, and now that piece of evidence has confirmed my my thoughts. So it's really making sure that boards go outside, get expertise, again, rotate directors to present dissenting views, and always directors have to be willing to look at the biases and the practices of the board to ensure good governance. So one of the things that I want to at some point, and I think we're actually doing it, but I'd like to dive in deeper and work with staff on development of cultural metrics, so that we as a board really have that understanding. And there's never, it's always hard to do when you've got a lot of things to do, but it's a very important area, because it really can affect your ability to attract personnel to your company, or in our case to our department. So you'll keep hearing from me around this word of culture, and at the HR committee, I hope it's something that we can dig into a little bit further. And again, thank the board for the opportunity to being able to attend these. I've attended many ICD courses, sort of one-off morning breakfast things, but also other courses, and they are just packed with information and resource for you ongoing.
That's great. Barb, thank you very much for that report. Does anyone have any questions? This is a bit, maybe a bit nerdy of me, but Colette, do you think you could make us all little cue cards with those 4 forms of bias on them? They can be virtual cue cards, but I think that's really, like, I always like when someone goes to something, what can we take away and implement right away? So authority bias, groupthink, status quo bias, and confirmation bias, with a little, just a definition of what each of those are, so that we can just have them in front of us as we're making decisions at each board meeting, just to be mindful. So is that, Colette, is that easy? Could you do that?
Yep, will do.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Okay, thanks, Barb. That sounds like a great course. Sean, yours does as well. Does anyone else have any questions or comments or thoughts on that? Okay, sorry, and I recognize we have been sitting for now 3 hours. It's a long time to sit. The last thing that we've added to the agenda is to rise and report on the Vic PD's annual report. We do it in camera first to make sure that there are no glaring errors, omissions, typos, or anything embarrassing. But it is an excellent report, and right after today's meeting, it will be added to the public agenda. So if any members of the public want to look at it, the department's done a great job putting it together. It highlights some of the challenges that we faced in 2020, because it is a reflection on last year. But the department has also, division by division, laid out what the priorities are for 2021. So, Chief, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to say. There's nothing really here for anyone to look at, but just wanted to flag for the public that it will be up on Vic PD's site and on the board site so everyone can have a read through it.
No, thank you, Mayor. That's good.
Okay. All right, the last items here are just for information for the public. There's correspondence. We don't need to do anything with it, but we do put it here. And I will just take the time to recognize the commendations. There are many members of the public who've taken the time to write in and share their thoughts with us, with the board, with the staff, on their experience of the officers. And as you can see from these commendations, our officers are providing excellent service, sometimes, as you can see from some of these letters, in very challenging circumstances. So never want time to go by without acknowledging that. And with that, I don't think we have anything else on the agenda unless I am missing something. So I would request a motion to adjourn. Thanks, moved by Charla and seconded by Sean. I want to thank everyone for their attendance and participation. Thank the members of the public for joining us, and thank all the staff at Vic PD that made our first ever virtual meeting possible. It seemed to go relatively well, and hopefully we won't have to do it for too long, but it's good to know that we can if we need to. So with that, have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Thanks, everybody.